Right. So far what we did is we did install the OBI in our environment, and we know how to get started with OBI. So let's start working on creating a simple repository and deploy that repository and see how do we do with the OBI. So just to recap, so what we did is we installed the OBI. So if you see here in your program files, Oracle Business Intelligence, you see the OBI is installed. Okay, and your OBI software is up and running. And I have started the server. So if you look at it here, I have started the server. This is a command line utility, and it starts on the command line. And you should keep it running. Otherwise, if you close it, then your server is down. So just to recap, to start the server, what are the different steps that we follow to start the server? First, we have to start the database. Second thing that we need to do is start OBI server. Okay, so this is from the start BI server. From here, Oracle Business Intelligence and start BI services. Okay. Now, it will take few minutes, but again, once it started, right, you see it as, server started in running mode. It means your OBI is, at least your WebLogic is running, and probably you can see, you can also verify Oracle Process Manager services running. Okay, so this is one thing that you should verify sometimes. To start with, if this Oracle Process Manager client, if you refresh your services, there is something on Oracle Process Manager instance. It should start. Sometimes it won't start automatically. In those cases, you can start it. That's not a problem. Actually, what happens is the process itself, right? So when you start the Oracle BA services, it should automatically trigger the startup of this service, Oracle Process Manager. But for some reason, sometimes it doesn't start automatically, but you can start from the service. It doesn't matter. These are two independent processes. They don't have any dependency. If you want, you can start directly without starting the WebLogic also. The problem here is, anyway, you have to start the WebLogic to have your OBI up and running to access your GUI and all the stuff. Okay. So I will go a little more in detail of what is this process manager and how does this process manager really link to the WebLogic and all. We'll discuss once we get a little familiarity on the usage of the tool and how we actually work on it. Okay, so now what we have is we have the OBI installed, and now OBI is running, and all we have to do is we need to create a simple repository. So essentially, within OBI we have two parts, right? So as a developer, if you are as a developer or if you go in a different roles, so your role may change depending on your experience and your expertise, right? So, but more or less, the OBI is same for everybody. Okay, so suppose if you are a software engineer or 4-5 years experience whose main intention is to work on the repository development and reports development, you are kind of a developer where your core job is to develop the things. Suppose if you have more experience, probably you can be a lead with knowledge to guide the other people and work on your own as well. But if you're having like 10 years experience or 8 years experience, you could be a business analyst, or depending on your interest and experience, right? So um, the process is the same for every role. There's no difference. But again, depending on your experience and depending on your role, you're looking at the tool from a different perspective. Suppose if you look at it as an architect, suppose you're an architect and you're learning OBIE because you think there is a good opportunities in data warehouse architecture and especially in the OBIE domain. Right, so as an architect, you have your own perspective. You don't really need to go in detail and learn the OBA repository step by step. But at the same time, you should have an understanding of the process and how it works and what it does. So it doesn't matter like what level you're trying, what kind of jobs you're trying. So it's a basic to learn kind of how to create repository and how to create reports and all the stuff within the OBI. And again, the roles and experiences and changes depending on the type of job that you're trying for. Okay, so we have two important parts within OBI that we as a developer learn. Okay, the first thing is repository creation. So repository creation is basically it's a core metadata development. So when I say metadata development, we create all our basic requirements like an ingredients that is required for the reporting. Right? So we create all our models, calculations, and all the facts, dimensions, and all the stuff that is required. So basically, what we do is before we actually go for building a reports, and we create the required metadata. Like before building a house, you you order raw material, right? So without the raw material, you cannot build the house up. You need bricks, you need cement, you need sand, all this stuff, right? The same way here, before we actually start building the reports, we prepare all our required models, calculations, and everything for the reports. That's where we do all the metadata development, which is nothing but a repository creation. So that is the first step. Once our repository is done, so second thing that we do is deploy. Deploy repository to the BI server. So we deploy the repository to our OBI server. Okay. Once the repository creation is done, we deploy it. And the third step that we do is once the deployment is done, create reports. Okay. So three-step process. One is creation of the repository. Second is deploy the repository to the server. Third is create reports. So we do everything in the same order. So anything that you would like to develop, any kind of reports that you would like to develop, the first thing is you need to create a repository. Without the repository, without the metadata, you cannot create the reports. You will not be able to create the reports because unless you have the metadata, unless you have the core model that you build, you cannot create the repository. You cannot create the report. So you build the repository first, and whatever that you build, you deploy the same repository to the server. And once the repository is deployed to the server, and you use the same repository, and based on the repository, you create the reports. Okay, so let's get started with the first step, which is a creation of the repository. Now, how do you create the repository and where do you create the repository? So in OBIEE, when you install the OBIEE, you have something called Oracle Business Intelligence. Okay, within that you have something called BI administration. So BI administration is a client utility or GUI client where you actually build your repository. So as I said, don't confuse with the naming convention. It's not any administration tool, it's a development tool itself. So but the naming convention is given like that by the CBL, so they're continuing the same name. So BI administration is not or got nothing to do with any of the OBI administration. It's a pure OBIEE development. I can say we can call it as a BI designer. So for now, okay, so it's a BI designer where we create repository using this designer. So when I click on it, it will automatically open a small tool, which I call it as BI administration tool. Right. So going back to the thing. So basically, when I would like to create the report, so the fundamental thing that we need to think of, right? So when you're talking about creating the reports or doing something, so the essential thing for any reporting environment is the data, right? So when I want to build the reports, right, what I need data. Without the data, I cannot really create any report. It's not possible for me to create the report, right? So data is very important aspect even before I start thinking about report creation, because when I don't have any data, I cannot even create a single report. Suppose say I have started a store and I want to understand how the store is performing. So if for me to understand the store is performing, store has to generate some business, right? So today I started the store and I cannot do the reporting today because I don't have any data, right? So you have to have the data to be available to understand uh, something about the store and how the store is performing, what products are selling good, what products are not selling good, and all those things. I need the data. So even for us, when I'm thinking of creating a report or creating a repository, I need to know what is my data and where is my data. And so then only I'll be able to create the reports. So the first thing that we do is we identify the data that is available for us. So even in our case, we use the data which is available in our user, which is called a BI sample. So when you install Oracle, this sample database doesn't get automatically installed, and you have to download it. I'll share you the BI sample schema to you. So when you download the BI sample schema, so you have a set of tables that is available in the BI sample schema. When I say BI sample schema, it's kind of a user with a set of tables available, right? So you have multiple tables available in this user. So remember, we have a user called of Scott, right? So when you install the database, what do you get? You get a user Scott. What does a Scott user do? I mean, so it has a set of tables, like you have employee table, you have department table, you have jobs table, this and that. Why is this particular kind of user is available in the database? Because when you install that database, if you want to work with the database, or if you want to learn the database, right? So you simply log into the Scott and you just do some queries and learn the database or use the database. So it's kind of, to test and to use the database functionality, we use the Scott user. So, but again, Scott user is a simple a user with a simple set of tables, which is for the basic usage of the database. Whereas, when I actually want to do the reporting, I need to have a tables, or I need to have the data, which is kind of, for the purpose of the reporting, I should have a more data, right? Because when I want to do the reporting, I should have data with different tables and all that stuff. So my schema is little bigger, so we cannot use the Scott. So that's the reason what Oracle has done is, for us to learn OBIEE, for us to work on OBIEE, they have provided us some sample data that we call it as an BI sample. So there are different schemas available. We can use the schema called SH, sales history, or we can use OE, order entry. So Oracle has some other set of schemas. We can also work with those schemas as well. But again, so BI sample is one good sample database that is provided by Oracle, which you can do all the different scenarios that is possible, or that is available within the OBI. So I prefer you install this schema. Okay, so we'll see how do we install this schema, probably later tomorrow or sometime. I don't know. It's easy. I mean, it's kind of a zip file where you have a set of scripts available. You execute the scripts one by one. So let's not go in detail. We will come back to that. How do we install the schema? So I will take you to the um, SQL Developer. Within the SQL Developer, we actually open the schema and see how do we. Let's explore the schema. What is there inside this BA sample, and how do we use this BA sample schema? Right. So if you look at my screen, and I have the SQL Developer, Oracle SQL Developer. As I said, Oracle SQL Developer is a small application where you can navigate and you can manage your database, or you can query the database, and kind of you can browse the database. So contrary to the SQL Plus, it's basically a small command line utility. So if you look at here, if I go to my Oracle database, if I say application development, there's two things. One is SQL Developer and another is SQL Plus. If I say SQL Plus, what it opens a simple command line utility where you can type the commands. That's it. You cannot do much. You cannot save or you cannot retype the same command. You cannot execute the same command. You don't have those features. So every time you want to do something, you have to type the command. So this is for the basic operations you would like to do. You can do it. So that's not a problem. But if you would like to have a good GUI utility where you can create the connection and access your database tables in a GUI, then you have to use an SQL Developer. So sometimes the SQL Developer that comes with Oracle, suppose if you see here, there is an Oracle database application development, there is an SQL Developer. If you try to access this one, this may not work properly because of the Java versions and all the stuff. So if it doesn't work, no problem. What you can do is you can download the SQL Developer software separately from the Oracle. So you can go to Google and say Oracle SQL Developer download. So you download something with Java. So let me show you in case if you need. If you download with the Java, right? So this is Oracle SQL Developer downloads. So if I click on this one, so it's a Windows installation, or it's kind of Windows JDK 8 or above. Okay, then (32-bit, 64-bit) 8, Java 8 is required. I think they have changed the total setup. I mean, earlier they used to give. So if I download, see, this is having no JRE. So let's go to the previous version. Yeah, this is the previous version. There is something called a previous version available. So if you look at it here in the screen, so there is something called a Windows 64-bit includes JDK 7. So it has its own Java. So it won't ask you for the Java again, and then all you have to do is simply say download. It's a zip file. Okay, all you have to do is extract the zip file. Extract the zip file. Inside the zip file, you'll have an SQL Developer. So something, I think I have that. So let's see. I should have somewhere in C drive or D drive. I have my SQL Developer somewhere. I don't know the location. I have my SQL Developer somewhere in my C drive or D drive. So what you do is you can simply download this zip file, which is of 311 MB. Okay, and you extract it. So right click extract here. It will extract to a folder called SQL Developer, and go inside the folder. You see a shortcut. You see a executable file, exe file, SQL Developer.exe. Double click on it, it will open. Right. Right. Let's go back to this. So inside the SQL Developer, what you can do is you can create a connections to the database. So what is my user? I have a user called base sample that is available inside my database. So how do I create a new connection? So I can go here and I can say new connection. It will open me a connection. Something like this. All you have to do is you give the connection name. You can give any name, the username and the password. Whatever the user that you have, whatever the password you have. Here you should provide the connections. Like what is your host name and what is your port number and the service name. So it depends, like in where is your database is running and on what port my database is running and what is the SID of my database. Okay, or what is the service of my database. Okay, So if you give these details, you can create and save and test and all the stuff. So for now, if I click on BA sample, this is my BA sample user, and this is my username, and it's not taking the password. I need to give the password. So my password is also the same thing, BA sample only. If you want to save the password, you can save the password, so it won't ask you for the password again. Right, so the host name is localhost, and port is 1521, and my database is ORCL. So if I want to test it, it is success, which means I'm able to connect to my user BA sample with the connection detail that is provided. So once my test is done, and I can say connect. Right, if I connect, it will connect. If I scroll down, I mean, if I kind of maximize this one, it will see this is connected here. So it is navigating to the database. See, there is the symbol has changed, showing that it is connected. If I click on navigation, it will show me all the different options available in my database user, like tables, views, indexes, package, procedures, functions, and all the stuff. Okay, so now if I click on the tables, then I can see the tables available in my database. Like I have my different tables available. So these are the standard tables that is provided by Oracle, more or less. Most of the tables are. So if you see here, there is different tables available, which starts with SAMP, right? There are some tables like SAMP offices. If you click on SAMP offices, and I have a table, and I should have some data inside the table. Okay, this is the table with a set of columns, and if I click on the data, so this is my data. So this is kind of a database navigation. You can navigate your database with the GUI. So this is your officers table. If I say go to the products table, then I can see the product information. If I go to the table called revenue table, so this is my revenue information. So if I say, if I want to understand how many rows are available in this table, I say right click on the table and say table and count rows. So this kind of it's a pure GUI. You don't really need to know much SQL. So there's 200,000 rows available in this particular table. I mean, it's not that you shouldn't know SQL, but again, it doesn't really bother you to know too much SQL. But if you want to write any SQL queries, you can write SQL queries here. So this is your kind of what to say, the designer kind of stuff, where if the moment you connect, it will open the BA sample connection, and you can type your queries here. Suppose if I want to type query like select star from offices underscore D. Suppose. So run. Right, so it's selecting the data, right? So and I can type one more command. It's kind of I can use the same command again if I want. But in SQL plus command line utility, you cannot do these things again and again. So that's kind of an advantage with the SQL developer. So okay, right. So I mean, the idea is not to teach you SQL developer, but I just wanted to make you guys feel a little bit comfortable on how do we access our source. Okay, so this is our BA sample with a set of tables that is available here, where we can make use of these tables as our source, where we have some data available in these tables, including products or offices or revenue or all channels. So we have data available. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to make use of these tables and build the reports. Okay, somebody is on speaker. Could you please mute your mics? Venu, could you please mute your mic? Okay, thank you. Okay, right. So no. After you download SQL Developer, BA sample doesn't show up. The good question. So you have to have the BA sample schema available in your database. So I'll share you the script for the BA sample, and I'll share you the zip file for the BA sample. Once you install the BA sample in your system, then only you'll see it. Okay, but for now, I'm not going to the BA sample installation level because I don't want to really kind of a block you there, the basics. Okay, I want to show you something to do with the OBIEE. Then probably, if required, we'll come back and we'll see what does we have in a BA sample, how do we install the BA sample, and also anyway, I don't expect you guys to start developing the repository today or tomorrow. It's kind of, I'm just giving you the heads up on the different things. So once you get familiarized with the things, then you can get started. So let's see how do we do the things in OBIEE. Then probably slowly we'll come back and we'll see how do we have this BA sample installed on our databases. Right. So as I said, we have a set of tables that is available in our database with some data. Okay, and our objective is make use of these tables and create a repository. Okay. So I have a number of tables, and but again, I'm not going to use all the tables, right? So I'm going to use a couple of tables which is required for me. So kind of out of all these tables, I pick few. Let me close unnecessary windows. Okay, out of all these tables, I pick few. So let's pick the tables like we have the products table, we have offices table, we have revenue table. So for now, no, probably no, we are good with these three. Otherwise, I can also pick some other table like customers. Okay, customers, I can say channels, or I can say time. Okay, so there's a couple of tables available. That there's a time table also available. But again, let's get started with only these three tables so that it's easier for us. Okay, right. So before actually we go and start doing it in the repository, I'll show it here in a graphical perspective. So just to explain, the repository is actually split into 3 layers. So, right. So the first one is the physical layer. The second one is the BMM layer, and the third one is the presentation layer. So it's a physical layer where we have all our physical data available, which means like whatever the data that we have in our database, our source. Okay. The other one is a business model and mapping. This is our BMM layer, I call it as. Okay, which I have my business it's kind of my model which I am building for my requirement. So I have a physical layer which I have my physical data available, BMM layer which I have my business model which I build it for the requirement. So there is one more layer I have something called presentation layer. So inside the presentation layer, I'll build it. So I'll explain you these 3 layers. So physical layer is something that we have, like what are the tables we have, what are the data that we have in our database, which we are interested in creating the report. So this is what we have. Okay, and the presentation layer is what we need. So in the sense, suppose say I have my database where I have some data available in this database. So what is the bottom line? What is the objective of this data? Why am I using my OBIEE? I'm using OBIEE because I want to create reports on this OBIEE data, right? I mean, the database data. Whatever the data that I have in this particular database, I would like to make use of the data. On the data, I would like to create the reports. That's my core objective. Okay. But again, remember, say I may have X data. I may have some data which is called X. So X is good. I mean, there's a lot of data available. I can make use of the data. But the thing is, probably I may want X plus Y. So I have X data. I want X also, but at the same time, I also want Y, which means I would like to create some additional calculations, additional manipulations. Right? Reporting it's not only what you have, right? You have to create something kind of new. When I say new, suppose I may have a sales, or I may have a revenue in my database where I got some measure or some calculation that is available in the my source system that tells like what is the revenues. But in the reporting, based on that particular revenue column, you may need to create a lot of additional calculations, something like average revenue, maximum revenue, minimum revenue. Okay, so um, top 10 revenues. Okay, so for an example, these 10, these 4, like, so you can create as many calculations as you want. So the percentage of revenue, percentage of growth, percentage of a profit, percentage of kind of loss, number of units sold. So these are all the different calculations that you create as part of your reporting. So not all your data is directly available in your physical database when you are doing the transaction. So you have the data, but you can make use of that basic data and you can create additional calculation that is required for the reporting, because business users always want to see the reports, and for the reports you need to have the very detailed information that explains how our data looks and what it does, right? So that's the reason, as part of your reports development, you need some additional data or additional calculations that we need to create the reports. That's what we call it as a presentation, what we need. This is what we need. Right now, we have some data, we have something with us, and we need something for us, right? So how do we derive? Like we need to derive, right? So we need to create something that is required. So that's what we call it as how we convert. How I can say how we convert, how to create, how we enhance. Could be anything. We can call anything. So basically, we have something in our physical database, which I call it as a physical layer, which I import the data to the physical layer. Once I have something with me, and my requirement is something that I need for my business user, because there is a basic requirement that is defined. My business user says I need these 10 reports. To create these 10 reports, these are the different measures, or these are the different calculation my business user is interested to look at. So I need to create those calculations based on what I have. So that's where we make use of the business model layer or BMM layer to create the calculations, to define the calculation. Something like if I have A equal to 10, B equal to 20, that's what I have. But my user says I need C. Of course, when he says he needs C, but he'll also tell you like C is A plus B. So which means I'm creating a C by using a logic A plus B. So when my user wants C, he'll get the C. It doesn't matter how C is created for him. So the same way here, when I have some data and when I have some information with me, and when I need something, we use the OBIEE to create those things based on what we have. So that's where we split this into 3 layers. One is physical layer, which is what we have, and presentation layer, what we need. So in between we have BMM layer that will convert from what we have to the what we need. Okay, so we write our logic inside the BMM layer to create the data model, or to create the data that is required for us. Okay, just give me a minute. Right. Okay, so now let's get started with this one. So first we have identified that we need 3 tables. Like we are going to use these 3 tables inside our physical layer, because we would like to make use of these 3 tables. And based on these 3 tables, we'll create a model. At this point of time, we'll create a very basic model, which we don't really rush ourselves and try creating the big thing. We'll start with a basic model. Initially, what we do is we simply expose whatever that we have to the users. So whatever that we have in these 3 tables, we would like to make use of those data and simply display those data only. So initially, my repository is a very plain repository which displays whatever that we have. We are not trying to really create too many additional columns or too many calculations. So the plain repository. So let's get started with this one. So and I'm not going. Sometimes we go in depth and we'll try to understand more detail, but again, it's not required at this point of time. So because I want you guys to get a feel of it from the overall perspective. Then you'll automatically get to understand everything over a period of time. So if you go in detail, you will lose the bigger picture. So let's get the bigger picture first, then we'll go in detail and understand each and every kind of small details. Right. So I'm in my BA administration tool, which is my GUI. So I simply say new. I'm going to create a new repository. So this repository could be anything and with any name. So I can give any name, which is BI sample. Okay. Suppose say 01. Assuming that I'm creating a repository BA sample 01. This is the name that I'm giving. I can give any name. Doesn't matter. I can give ABC XYZ. Could be any name. But remember, you give some reasonable name of what you are actually creating this for. So I've given a repository with the name BA sample 01. Okay, so now this is the location where your repository is going to get created. So probably now if you want, you can copy this location and you can put it in Notepad and uh, so just to understand where it is created. But again, anyway, we'll at a later point of time we'll see how do we navigate to this location without by hearting it. Okay, so for now you just keep it in Notepad in case if you are when you're deploying, right? If you have to navigate to this location, you can use this location. But otherwise, it's the standard location where your repositories always get created. Okay, so there's an option called import metadata. So either you say yes or no. So if you say yes, as soon as you create the repository, right? I mean, as soon as you fill these details and say next, it will ask you to import the data. Metadata is like, what is a metadata? Metadata is a data about data. It's a structure. So when I say metadata, into the repository, you need to remember one thing. It's the metadata that we are importing, which means we are not actually importing the data. We are importing the only structure only. I'll show you how it looks. Okay, so I'll say no for now, which means it won't import any data or it won't import any structures for now. It will create a repository, which is a plain repository. Then we can import it again. That's not a problem. Okay. So I'll give a password to this repository. Could be anything. So I will give the password as a welcome one. So this is a standard password I would like to use. So this is the password that protects your repository. So anybody who wants to open this repository at a later point of time has to provide this password, whatever that you have given. If they're not providing any password, or if they don't provide a valid password, you will not be able to open and view the repository. Okay. So now since you have provided the required details and all you have to do is simply say finish. So your repository is done and your repository is created and you can save this repository. So, okay, I mean, there's nothing here, but I'm saving it here. So, I mean, this is one of the questions that sometimes they may ask in the interview. So if I create a repository and what if I save the repository, blank repository, what does it say? Does it give any error? No, it will save. Okay, so some simple things, but sometimes, yeah, I mean, in the interview, they kind of ask these twisted questions. So it's a kind of, what I say is an observation and you explore, right? Doesn't matter. I mean, you have the tool. You just keep looking at the options. What options you have? If you click on this, what will happen? So it's kind of you need to explore the tool here and there. So then only you'll get to see like what are the features available. So and you remember also. So when you explore something on your own, when you read something about it and you feel it more, it's useful. So you remember it in an easier way. Right, so let's get started, and all we need to do is we need to simply import our structures, right? So as I said, this is my plain empty repository with 3 layers: physical, BMM, and the presentation. So now all I need to do is I need to import my data to my physical layer, import my structures to my physical layer. So I go to the file menu and I say import metadata. So when I say import metadata, basically I'm importing the structures. When I say metadata, you need to. It's very very important in OBIEE or any of the tools, right? Understanding the metadata, understanding what we are doing. So I don't want you guys to be in false assumption that we will be importing all the data, and also I want you guys to have a very good clarity on what we are doing. So that is very, very important, because otherwise it makes no sense to go all the way and complete the entire course and doesn't realize that what we are actually doing. So metadata is only structures. When I say structure, suppose what is a structure? So let me spend a few minutes on this. Suppose if I have a table, right? So let's take this as an employee table. Right, so my employee table is having, assuming 2 columns or 3 columns. So this is my table, this is the first column, second column. So I have 3 columns. Okay, say I have my column name is employee number, e-name, say salary. So the third column is, I say, salary. Okay, I have 3 columns in my database table. Okay, now I can say employee number is of number, e-name, varchar2 of say 20, where employee number may be number of 6 or something. Okay, the other thing is a salary, maybe number of 6 again, or whatever. So I have my employee number, I have e-name, and I have my salary. So these are 3 columns I have, right? So if you look at here, I have 3 columns, and the data type of each column is this. So this is the table. Okay, this is what I call it as a metadata. Metadata, which is a definition of your data. It explains your structure. So it tells, like, what kind of data goes into the employee number, what kind of data goes into the employee name, what kind of data goes to the salary. So as long as my data follows this particular data types, I can insert any number of records. So the moment I start inserting the data, that is, I call it as data. So I can say 101. So suppose say Raj, salary say 1000. Okay, suppose say 102, so Ravi, so 2000, suppose. Now if I give ABC here, my database doesn't allow to insert, because my employee number is a number, it's not the varchar. So that's how my metadata talks about. My metadata is kind of, it's a syntax, it's a structure. So to import my data, I am not actually going to import this data, because this data doesn't matter for me, because as long as I know the structure, how it looks like, what is the data type of the employee number, e-name, salary, I can import or I can insert 10 records or 20 records or 100 records or even 1000 records or a million records, also doesn't matter, as long as I follow the structure of the database. That's what we also do it in our OBIEE. So when we are importing the data from the database, we are not actually importing the data, we are only importing the structure. So tomorrow when I want to do the reports, my reports are not dependent on any particular data, because today I may have a sales table which is having 100 records. So when I do the reporting, my report is created with 100 records. Tomorrow, my sales table is loaded in the source with 100,000 records. Now, when I have 100,000 records, when I run the sales report, my report is created based on the 100,000 records, which means by importing the structures, my OBIEE can do the report on any number of rows that is available in the source. If my source is having 100 records, it will create the reports based on the 100 records. So which means my reporting is dynamic. I'm not bounding my repository with any set of rows. It can work with any number of rows in the database, because I'm not actually importing any data into my repository. Only I am importing the structures into my repository. So to explain you in a simple way, if I say int a equal to 10, so int a is the metadata, technically speaking. Metadata is something that explains there is a variable a which is of type integer. That is the metadata. So what data is 10 is the data. So what we are doing is we are importing only this one. We are not importing the data, because tomorrow when you give 10 value to a, or 20 value to a, 30 value to a, 100 value to a, the a is able to handle it. So you can assign any value to it, which means you're importing something which is a structure which can handle any data. Okay, so let's go back. So now what we're doing is we are going to import the structures. So we have structures for the three tables, right? So what is our three tables? I have my product table and I have my offices and the revenue. So I go here, and from my file menu I say import metadata, so which I'm going to import the structure. So for now, to import the data, all I need is I need a connection, because the administration tool is also like a small software, where if my software needs to import the structures, I need to provide where my database is available, right? Okay, so then if you look at here, there is a different connection types here. So there is an ODBC, there is a different connection types which will look at those things. ODBC is like an Oracle database, open database connectivity. It's kind of standard drivers where you'll get, but let's not worry about these things. And we have one connection that is called an OCI 10G/11G. It's OCI nothing but an Oracle call interface. That's a kind of a driver. This is Oracle native drivers. So where we can use this to connect to the Oracle database, because when I want to import the structures, I need to connect and I need to import. Then only what happens when I provide my database details. What my administration tool do is, what my BA administration does is, it will connect to the database with the details that I provide, and whatever the tables that you select, right? So from the tables, it will simply retrieve the metadata and import it into our physical layer. So that way, I don't really need to create each and every table manually on my own. So if you want to create, you can create the tables manually on your own. But the problem is in how many tables you create. Suppose if a table with 4 columns, you can create a table and you can create the 4 columns. You can define the data types and everything. That's fine. But if my table is having 500 columns, so is it possible for you to create? Obviously, it's not possible. Even if you create, and there is a, you tend to do mistakes or you tend to do typos or whatever, right? So it's not advisable you go all the way and create the structures manually on your own. The easiest way is make use of the import utility and connect to the database and select the database table, and the administration tool will automatically import the structures for you. So let's connect it, and my data source name is ORCL, because by default when you install the database, the default schema is ORCL. The default service name is instance, I can say. Instance name is ORCL. Okay. And the user, you remember, we have the user called BA sample, right? So I have a BA sample user. My password is also BA sample. So I'm connecting to my Oracle database with the data source name ORCL, and the username BA sample and the password BA sample. And again, one thing that you need to remember after the installation, you need to, so you say next and you'll connect to the database. But sometimes, after the installation, for the first time you do it, it won't connect. It will give you an error. So there is a simple post installation task that you need to do. That is, you need to move the TNS names file of your database to your OBIEE location. Suppose say if you install the database has something called TNS names file. So TNS names file is kind of a file with a list of say connections that is available. So I can say I go to my user. Within my user, I have this is my Oracle installation. So I have my product, and within my product I have 11G, and there is a DB, and inside this I should have something called a network admin app Dinesh product, version of the product, and database instance name. Within that you have a network, you have admin, or you can go to the database installation location and search for TNS names file, tnsnames.ora. If I open this file, usually this will have your database connection details, TNS names network configuration file. It's kind of this is the configuration of your database. So it's kind of ORCL is an alias. So the moment you are giving ORCL, so you may be thinking if I give just ORCL, how does my administration tool know where is my database is running. So I mean, so maybe the database I have is in local system, so perfectly it is running on local and it can connect. What if my database is available in some remote system where I don't have a kind of it's not running on my local systems? How do I provide? Do I provide the ORCL dot server name and all? No, I don't. I simply give the ORCL or whatever the name that I want. But how does it know that where exactly my database? I need to know the server name. I need to know the port name. I need to know the service name. I need to know all these details to connect to the database, right? So if I go to the TNS names, where this is my TNS name, which is having an alias ORCL. So all I'm doing is simply using ORCL, but internally my administration tool or my BA administration will access this TNS names file, and from this TNS names file it will look for what is this ORCL alias. ORCL means it's a host on admin PC, which is my local system. It means it is on a port 1521. It means it is connecting to a service ORCL. Okay, so say there is one more ORCL dev. I can also give ORCL del. If I give ORCL del, then it will use these details. Probably it could be another server. Maybe it's not admin PC. It's a cloud.amazon.com. Suppose if I give something like this. Now, if I give ORCL dev, where it is connecting, it is actually connecting to the cloud.amazon.com, and within this particular server, assuming that there is some, okay, within this server it is connecting to the database with the port 1521 with the service name that is running ORCL, suppose. So that's where my I don't save it. That's what my TNS names file is all about. Okay, so you can create as many new entries inside this TNS name. Suppose tomorrow in your office they ask you to import the data from XYZ source, and that is available in so and so database. No, I cannot simply directly import the data. You have to come to the TNS names file first and duplicate this entry. Something similar. Now I duplicated this ORCL and I created one more thing called ORCL dev. So there is one more entry that is available here. Simply change the server name and port number and the service name depending on where it is running and with what name it is running. So now you save it, then you have one more connection. Now use that connection. So that way now you can connect to any database globally as long as you are on network by creating these connections. But again, yes, you are creating these connections inside your Oracle database. But how does my OBIEE know? So my OBIEE doesn't directly access this one, because the reason is it's a database service. So what it does is it requires this TNS names. So I copy this TNS names file, because OBIEE requires a dedicated TNS names file for its own, so that it doesn't really bother about any changes that happens in the Oracle database. So I go here in my installation wherever my OBIEE is installed, right? So here my OBIEE is installed in my Oracle BA location. Okay, inside my Oracle BA location, I have something called Oracle underscore BI1. So this is the core location, and inside there is a network, if I believe. Yes, there is a network, there is an admin. Just paste this file here. So I mean, I already did. Paste the file here. There's already called TNS file, same file available here. So now that's it. And again, you do it before you opening the repository. If you open the repository and you see an error, you go and copy paste it, and you have the file, but it doesn't work. You have to fully close the repository. In case if you forget to do it, fully close the repository, then reopen it again if in case you see error. But again, since I've already copied before, so see what happens is, when you're opening the repository, repository will open all these configurations. When it is opening, administration tool will load with all these configurations. So that way, if the file is already there in this location, no problem. If not, copy the file to this location, and if your repository is already open, close the repository, close the administration tool, and now reopen it. So it will load this time. Okay. So now yeah, I mean, sometimes what happens is, like, we have links everywhere, so we'll get deviated and we'll get into different topic. But yeah, it requires, right? So that's what I said. In one class you don't get the big picture, so you will be touch basing different small things, and the required links between different topics. So, but overall, in couple of days you'll get into familiarity and you'll get a feel of end to end. right? So this is your connection type, which is OC Oracle call interface you're connecting. And as you remember, ORCL, then it's an entry, an alias inside your TNS names file, where my administration tool use this alias and will get to know the details of the server, and it will connect to that server and my username and the password. So next. Right, so when I connect to the database, and what it is showing me is the different objects that is available in my database. So kind of, I have my tables, keys, foreign keys, which means what do you have in the database? You have the tables, you have the keys of the table, and you have the relationship between the tables. You have system tables, you have aliases and synonyms, views, and you have many things. By default, these are not selected, but in case if you want to use, you can select them as well, not a problem. But essentially, you have three objects, which is the table, keys, and the foreign keys, which we are interested in. So these are the default selected objects, and if you don't want, you can unselect also, not a problem. So what are these? Suppose say now when you are importing, right? So suppose assuming that I have three tables in a database, right? So if I select tables, keys, and the foreign keys, so what exactly my administration tool will do? Because you have selected tables, it will import all the tables. Yes, all your three tables are imported. That's the first thing. Since you have selected keys, suppose say if my three table is having a key, suppose say employee table, so suppose say product table is having a key as a product ID, okay, and offices table is having a key as the office ID, then okay. Which means whatever the keys that is available in the database, okay, it will automatically import. So that is the table is imported, which is the table structure is imported. At the same time, the key of the table is imported. Good. Now what the foreign keys talks about, the relationship between these three tables. Suppose if the three tables that I'm selecting is having some relationship between them inside the database, I'm talking about inside the database. What it will do, it will identify those relationship automatically, it will import those relationships. So that way, if I select these three, if my tables is available in the database, if they are having keys and if they are having some relationships, I do not really need to create them manually into my OBIEE. So my administration will automatically import them. So that's what it is all about. So I'm selecting the metadata type you want to import. So metadata types you want to import tables and the keys and the foreign keys. Say next. Now if you look at here, I have my BA sample schema. I have my BA sample schema where I have a couple of tables available. If you look at it here, so as we discussed initially, what we thought of importing, my products. So remember, I selected products. If I navigate up and down, nothing else is selected. That is very important, because the moment you say the moment you're trying to select one more table, you hold the control button from your keyboard and you select your revenue. This is one more table, and select your offices. I've selected three tables, and again just see that nothing else is selected. The reason is sometimes these three tables are selected and this BA sample is selected and this ORCL is also selected. Assuming what happens if you say import all the schemas, because the ORCL is selected, all the schemas will be imported to your repository. It will take hours and hours. So just making sure that you are importing only the objects that is selected. The objects that is required should be highlighted. Only the object that is required to be imported should to be highlighted, not all the other objects. So that's the problem with the kind of a control selection. If you hold the control button, whatever the kind of selected items will be highlighted. So you have to be very sure when you're importing. So nothing will happen, but again it will take a lot of time, and you will be importing unnecessary data, right? Unnecessary structures. So these three structures that I've selected, and let's say there is an option called import selected. So whatever the columns that you selected, whatever the table that is selected, you're importing. Or you can select, or you can import table by table also, not a problem. You don't need to import all the three tables in one go. Okay, so let's import these three tables. So now the moment I'm importing the tables, right, so it is asking me something called a connection pool. Basically, connection pool is the connection information. Suppose say what is the connection details that you are using to import the data. So those are the connection details. Suppose if you look at here, this is what I have, right? So I have the connection pool, and my data source name is ORCL, my username is base sample, my password is so and so. So whatever the details that I've used to import these tables, those details are copied to a connection. So there is a connection, there is an object called connection pool get created inside the repository. Once you import, that object will have what? The connection details that we have used to import these structures. Right? Okay, the reason is because we import the structure, that is fine. So tomorrow, if I have to get the data from these tables, I need a connection, right? So I need to know where these tables are available. That is the reason we'll import the connection also from where we have imported. So when in the runtime, when we need the data, we'll use the same connection to go and get the data, or any connection where these tables are available. So I can say connection underscore BA sample. So this name could be anything, doesn't matter, but just give a name, some reasonable name that explains where it is actually connecting. I click OK. There is additional configurations inside the connection pool, which we'll see while we go through. So now I have imported my BA sample, and where inside my BA sample, I have the 3 tables imported, and I say finish. Now, if you look at here in the physical layer, I have the 3 tables imported, where I have my tables are imported. And if you see these tables, I see something, I don't know, say there is an officers table, where my officers table is having these columns. This is the structures, I call it as, this is my products table, this is my revenue table. So these are only structures, there is no data. This is empty structures, there is no data. So if I want to save it, I save it. It is asking for, do you wish to check the global consistency? Say no. I mean, at this point of time, because it's my repository is not yet completed. It's a very the basic level, right? I just started the repository. It's not at completed, right? So my structures are imported. So all I can do is I can make use of these structures, and based on these structures, we build the repository. So now I have my structures imported into my physical layer. Now all I can do is I can create the relationship. I can define the relationships between these structures. Now you may be thinking, while we are selecting, we selected the keys, right? But where is my keys? I don't have any keys imported. See, we selected the keys and we selected foreign keys. We selected the table, but only the table is imported. Why the keys and the structures, why the keys and the foreign keys not imported? See, what my administration tool can do is, when it is importing the table, if the table is having any key, if the table is having any relationship, then only it can import. Suppose my database doesn't have any key defined, my database doesn't have any relationship between the tables, it cannot do much, right? So because when there is no key available, it cannot import. So those options there specifies, if there is a key, if there is a relationship, then it will import, otherwise it will simply import empty. So my BA sample tables are created, I mean, are provided with no keys and no relationships. That is the reason it has not created any key. But again, the reason they have provided without the key and without the relationship is because they want us to learn and do it on our own, and define how do we create the keys and how do we define the relationship between these tables and all the stuff. So that's the reason they have not provided. But again, we can create the keys and relationships on our own, and we can build the repository end to end. Okay. So I'm gonna stop it here now, because it's gonna take some time. So tomorrow we'll go little more detail, and we'll just try to define how do we define the relationship between these tables, and define a repository end to end, and deploy the repository, and create a very basic report and see how it looks like. So that way, we'll understand the end-to-end process. So remember, this is a very important aspects of OBIEE. Once you understand, like in the first few classes, once you understand this today and tomorrow, right? So you'll understand end-to-end creation of repository. So that's the core thing. Once you do it, and the rest of the things is simple, and they fall in place. So you don't really need to worry about. Okay. So any questions or anything before we wrap it up? Anybody has any questions? Anything that you don't understand? Okay, no questions. Good, very good. Right, guys. Then I'll see you tomorrow then. We'll continue the repository part tomorrow. Okay. Um, when you get access to the recordings, one